My name is Matt Marantz, and I'm a saxophone player here in New York. And I'm also an EWI player. And about a month ago, Lucas Schnapik at the Art of the Wind Synth website asked a few of us EWI guys to talk about our live setups a little bit. So mine has changed a lot in the 3 years or so that I've been playing this instrument. But for right now, I'm pretty much using, well, actually, I'm only using software. And the only hardware is the instrument itself and a couple of pedals that I use to switch up the patches and play chords, and also this computer that I built specifically for playing the EWI, believe it or not. I got so into it that I had to have a faster computer than my laptop. And the laptop's great, too. I have a MacBook Pro from about 2010 that still runs really well. And it's just not fast enough to do a lot of the sounds that I've made since I started building software patches for the EWI. They can't all be handled by the laptop. So I built this machine around an i7 processor. It's the newest i7 8700K. And I just did a bunch of research and figured out that it wasn't really that hard to build your own PC. You just do some research to figure out which parts are going to fit in the case that you want. And I wanted this smallish case that I could put in a bag and take to a performance if I wanted to. And it's worked out really well. I have a graphics card in it for other things. You don't really need that, but the main components are the i7 processor, the CPU, and the RAM, which is also overclockable, the kind that I bought, and it's running at a really fast speed, 3200 megahertz, and the processor is overclocked to 5 gigahertz, and that allows me to do almost anything you could possibly think of, as long as you keep it to 44.1K, and I can go all the way down to 48 samples in and out, which basically translates, long and short, is that I can get less than 2 milliseconds of latency out of it, which is really important when you're talking about software. So this is the sound card that I use. It's an RME Babyface Pro, and it's great because it's external and I can use it with both my Mac and this PC setup. The host software is Cubase 9.5, and I really like it. I just kind of switched to it recently. It was a long search. That's kind of why I waited to make this video, actually. Lucas asked me to make it a while ago, but I wanted to settle on something first. And for right now, it's worked out great. They made also the programming language that VST was built around. So anytime anyone programs a VST, they're using Steinberg, I guess, SDK to build their plugins. And that's important because you want everything to be compatible. And then as far as the software synths go, I'm using Falcon. That's one of my favorite ones. It's made by a company called UVI. And this is an analog synth patch that I just kind of programmed into it. It's got a few different oscillators, mainly like saw waves, I think. It's a pretty simple patch. This is like the most simple kind of soloing patch that I would ever usually play with. And this is how that one sounds. So the reason I like Falcon is that the envelopes, like mainly for the amp envelope, are really EWI friendly. They're really detailed, and you can really dive in and adjust just about every parameter of them. And there's a bunch of different ones, so you can try them all. And I'm talking about synthesis here mainly, but you can try them all and decide which one works best for you. And then it's got a bunch of different filters built in, and they're all super high quality. And I love that one. So I haven't actually experimented with it that much yet because I haven't had it that long. But this is an FM patch, which is frequency modulation synthesis that I made with it, and you can hear what that sounds like. So that's a cool one that you can cut through a mix with really well, like if you really need to cut through but you don't want to use distortion. It's a nice clean sound, and that's just one of like a virtually infinite amount of sounds that you could get out of its FM oscillator engine. And so speaking of FM synthesis, one of my favorite synths is the Yamaha DX7, which is specifically a 6-operator FM synth. And there's a great emulation of it in the computer, which was made by this guy, calls himself Digital Suburban, a company that makes a few different plugins. But this one is by far and away my favorite one that they make, and it's a DX7 emulator, and it's just basically the infrastructure of a DX7 in a plugin form. And they even modeled the output section, and it sounds like a DX7. It really does. This is a flute patch that I made, and you always have to EQ them. I have an EQ running on this a little bit, but I detuned one of the channels of it. I've got 2 different channels of it running, and one of them is a 4th down. So this is like a flute patch in 4ths. So I like that one a lot, and there again, you know, there's actually a database, I can't remember what that's called. I think it's called DX7 Librarian, and this Japanese guy, who as far as I know is still running it, compiled all 14 or 15,000 DX7 sounds that have been floating around the internet for years, and a lot of them are original factory patches or other ones that people have made, and he converted them to a sysx file, and you can download them from the internet. It's amazing. So you can just kind of like go through what I was doing when I made that patch, is that I was going through some of the breath controlled patches, and I found that one and I tweaked it a little bit because I liked it, but it didn't work exactly how I wanted it. And so that's a cool way you can kind of get inspired to make some EWI patches. You can just go through presets that other people have made, and I don't think I've ever ended up with just using a preset someone's made, but I always find a way to make it my own and make it kind of do what I want. I've got another similar patch in Dune 2, which is another one of my favorite software synthesizers, and that one sounds like this. It's another FM synth that I've grown to love. And there again, I've just detuned one of the channels down a 4th. Dune is amazing. It's also a virtual analog synthesizer. It's kind of like Falcon in that it does a lot of different types of synthesis, but it's the thing that I like the best about it almost is its distortion is so believable. I can get this sound sounding almost like a Alan Holdsworth lead, like, you know, when he would turn on a distortion pedal on his guitar and get what, you know, a lot of guitar players call your violin distortion sound. This, I think, is like a couple of pulse waves running through distortion, and they're slightly detuned, and there's also a filter distortion section, and it's all happening except for the delays inside the plugin. So check this one out. And yeah, I mean, that's one of my favorite patches to play when things get really intense on a gig where you're playing with a really loud rock drummer or something, and you really want to like take it up to Top Gun level distortion. That's a good patch to dial up. And then what's another one? Oh yeah, Reactor, which is made by Native Instruments, is a really great virtual analog kind of what would you say? It's kind of a virtual analog environment. And one thing that I really love about it is that it's in a way it's kind of its own programming language. And there's some guys online that are well, there's a lot of people that are on this thing called the Reactor community forum. And the user group has a library that you can upload to if you're a programmer. I've built a couple of very small changes into Reactor synths, but I'm not a programming genius like those guys, and the only thing I can do is sometimes adapt what I download to work for me. But the guys that are making it really cool are the people that have learned to use Reactor well enough to program synths for it. And this is one that I downloaded, which is one of my very favorite virtual analog synths. And you know, I'm just mainly using it for solo sounds here. You can play chords through it or whatever. But it's called Mocha, and it's free. I don't know. It's like this guy that just, you know, likes to build things in Reactor and share them for free on the user group. And to me, this sounds just as good as the Dave Smith Prophet I used to have. And I really can't tell the difference between an Oberheim Matrix 1000 that I have too, which is another great analog synth. And I'll just play a couple notes on that one for you. So I have the breath modulating the filter about 70%. So that means as hard as I blow, if I blow the hardest I can, it's only opening the filter up to about 70%, which keeps it from getting too buzzy and has a nice vintage dark tone to it. You could do that on any of these synths, but that particular one sounds really good to me. And let's see, what else do I have here? Oh, I should talk about playing chords. And before I do that, actually, I'll talk about how I'm changing patches, because you probably can't see. So I have to give a lot of credit to my friend and EWI guru, Seamus Blake, who taught me to do a lot of this stuff, and is one of my personal EWI heroes, if you will. And he's also a friend, and he wound up, when he was cleaning out his apartment, he found these old pedals, which are, well, they're not that old, but there's a new version of them. This is the Keith McMillan Soft Step, and they're really cool. They're like programmable foot pedal MIDI controllers, and this particular one controls the patches for my setup. And so basically, they have their own programming software, and I've got it set up so that 1 through 10 all send a different MIDI number into the computer, and the programs will react to it based on the way you program the, you know, Cubase in this case, to respond to the patch selection of each one of these things. So like this one, for example, this will, when I press number 1, give me my Falcon saw sound. And the reason it works is that it's sending continuous controller number 21, which I programmed it to do. And then you tell Cubase's generic remote to select this channel based on that controller number. So when I play the next one with my foot, number 2, it'll cue up the next sound. I don't even know if you can see that, but, well, yeah, maybe you can. As I go down the list, it changes to the next sound, and you don't hear anything from the other ones, and it also keeps the CPU from processing the ones that are not record armed. So you never really have to worry about running out of power with the computer. And so you can use them that way. You can also send note information from them, and that's pretty cool for chords. And I'll show you, like I said before I get to the chords thing, this is how it's working. This is another Keith McMillan soft step pedal that that Seamus gave me, and this one's called the 12 step, and it actually only sends notes, but you've got 12 to pick from. And so the way I'm getting my chords to happen when I'm playing live, a lot of times, is either you can play them with the EWI, and I'll show you how to do that too, or you can do it like this, which is you use a thing like MIDI chords, which is a very popular chords VST, or in this case I'm actually just using the Chorder app that's built right into Cubase on a couple of channels of Dune, which again is the software synthesizer. Those 2 channels are set up for just pads only, and then I've got another instance of another channel record armed at the same time with a different MIDI input that's hooked up to the EWI, so I can solo over it. And then the other MIDI input is coming from this pedal here, which when I play, you'll hear when I play that first one. I'm just playing it with my thumb right now. You can hear the first chord of the song. And this is a song I wrote, and I programmed the chords into Chorder before all this, and they're based on trigger notes which are sent from these pedals. And so you can program that other version, the soft step, to do that too, and I've got that happening down here on the floor. So what happens is you can just go down the line, and you've got each chord of whatever song you've programmed in happening in succession. And the cool thing about that is that I can play the chords with my feet, which is what I'll show you now, and I can solo over it at the same time. So right now, I put the thing back on the floor, and that's where it goes, you know, when I play live. And I'll show you a couple of chords playing over it at the same time, which is something that took me quite a while to figure out how to get it running, but now it runs perfectly. So check this out. So that's a lot of fun, and I've gotten a lot of mileage out of that for playing intros on gigs to a song, in this case called Squares, that I wrote. And I was just hearing an ambient intro. I actually wrote it that way, kind of rubato. And, you know, I got inspired mainly by the Alan Holdsworth records, where he'll do that a lot. He'll play chords on a synth, and then he'll play either on guitar or his Synthax, which is the guitar synthesizer that he used. He'll do intros like that. I even seen him do it on gigs. It's really cool. Of course, he's no longer living, but he's kind of been my main inspiration for all of this. No lie. So there's that way of doing it, and then there's another way of using chords with the EWI where you're actually playing them, like you saw in the beginning. I don't think I've talked about this yet. There's not a way to do that. I was researching it for a long time, trying to figure out how to get that happening. Taking inspiration from the Electro Harmonics company, which is a company that makes guitar pedals. They made a thing called the freeze pedal, and it's a little box about that big. You put on the floor, and if you're a guitar player, you can play a chord through it, and then you can press with your foot the freeze button, and then you can play over it. And I mean, I just thought that was so cool. I saw Kurt Rosenwinkel, the great guitar player, doing that a few times, and I just thought it was amazing, and I wanted to be able to do that, but I couldn't figure out how to get it happening. I researched for a long time. I don't know why it took me so long to find it. Maybe because there's only one plugin that I've found that can do this, although there's a couple of reverbs that'll do it too. There's nothing that'll do it like Time Freezer, which is what I ran across. It's made by one guy with a company in Europe called Physical Music, and Time Freezer is a two-part plugin. One of them is just called Time Freezer, where you can do something different, but the one that I use is Time Freezer Effects, and that one is really awesome because you can play audio through it, and then it has a freeze button, which is mappable to a MIDI number, and so you can control it with a button. And then I can switch patches, and what'll happen is it'll sustain whatever I've played into it at whatever volume that I choose, and it's a cool kind of like synthesized sound that it does. And so I can then transfer to a different sound with the patch selector and play over it, and it's pretty neat. And that's what I was doing at the beginning of the video, but I'll explain it now. So I've got a patch dialed up when I press number 5 on my soft step patch selector, which comes to a Dune 2 instance, which has actually a stock patch that I modified called Redemption, which is in the pad section. If you have that synthesizer, you can look in the pad section of the stock factory patches, and I just changed it to work with breath control, and so that cues that up, and then you just play it, and it plays those beautiful chords. But then what happens is I've got to this button, I have, you heard it there, the freeze button on that channel in Time Freezer mapped to that button on my EWI, so I can play a chord and then hold it out and then play over it with a different patch. So I'll show you in kind of slow motion what happens there. So I'll play the chord. Now I sustained it with that button, and you can hear it. And then I'll switch to a different patch with my foot, and then I can play over that. So that's a lot of fun. And you know, you can use any sound for that. It doesn't have to be that particular sound. That's just the one I'm using right now. And you can use any chord sequence too. And I don't know if I mentioned this, but the way I'm doing the rotating voices is Johann Louis Jinga's MIDI Harmonizer 3. And he's working on a new development of that software called number 4. But what it does basically is allows you to rotate voicings of the new one will have more, but the old one, number 3, which is what I'm using, because it's the only one that I know really well. I haven't had time to learn the new one yet. It'll rotate voicings of up to 4 notes, and you can have 8 rotations, up to 8 rotations. You can keep it to 1, so you can have parallel motion of the harmony. But I like to set it up so there's 8 rotating voicings, and so you never really know what's coming. Although that particular patch is mapped to an E minor scale, and it's cool because like you can play outside of the scale, and it'll always lock everything you're doing to a certain key center, in this case E minor. So when I play outside of the scale, it transposes everything else too, all the other 3 voices that are happening, and you can hear how it allows you to kind of side slip, if you will. So you can kind of like go in and out of the key center. You can't go very far, but it kind of modulates sort of between 2 keys in that particular patch, which you heard there. Pretty cool stuff. So lastly, I thought I'd mention real quick effects. Instead of carrying around a bunch of guitar pedals, that's one of the main reasons I switched to the computer. I just have all the effects running right there on the computer. And there's good effects, there's bad effects, there's all in between. Some of the best ones that I've found are the Sound Toys plugins. They make a delay called Echo Boy that I think is one of the best out there. It's really cool. It's got a bunch of different sounds that you can get out of it, like things that emulate a space echo, like a Roland space echo, vintage tape delay. A couple of different tape delays. It also does the Echoplex. It's got a model of that. It does some digital delays. There's another one they make called Crystallizer, the Sound Toys company, which will allow you to do reverse delay. And they also have a great reverb, which I'm using here, called, what's that called? Little Plate. That's a new one. It hasn't been out very long, but it really sounds cool. And then otherwise, I'm using something that my friend actually made, this great piano player, one of my favorite musicians, Sean Wayland, who actually played with Alan Holdsworth and is now diving into building things inside the computer for effects and technology. He's got a couple of different designs. One of them is this effect that emulates the Yamaha UD Stomp pedal, which is one of my favorite chorus and delay pedals that's no longer made. And also it only has a mono input, so that kind of makes it impossible to use with my little sound card, because I've only got stereo out, and I want to keep my setup running in stereo. So anyway, he built a 8-band delay, and it runs chorus and delay at the same time if you want it to. And I have that running on all of these patches a little bit, just to give it a little bit of modulation and a little bit more space. You may not be able to hear it really, but you know, that's why it sounds kind of chorusy. Some of that is a detuning of the oscillators, but some of it is also coming from the chorus that I have programmed, which I kind of tweaked my own version of a patch that he made. And that plugin, by the way, before I forget, is called Waylo Mod 88. You can find it on his website, SeanWayland.com, and it's $20. I mean, to me, it's the best sounding chorus in the computer that I've found in software land. There's not a lot of very good ones. Universal Audio has a really good one, but you can't use it live for a number of different reasons. And Echo Boy does a pretty good chorus, because we know that modulation effects are really just time-based, which means you can make a delay effect like Echo Boy also do that. It doesn't sound nearly as good, though. There's another plugin company called Valhalla, and they make a few different ones that I have. One of them is Vintage Verb, and that's pretty good. It's not as good as Sound Toys, the little plate. I don't think it's as good, although you can do some different things with it. It has a hall sound that doesn't come from little plate, so I use it for some things. And there's another one that Valhalla makes called Ubermod, and that's a echo and delay, and also does a really nice chorus. It is a nice chorus. It doesn't sound as good as a Walo Mod 88, so I usually use that one. But when you want a little bit more subtle chorus, sometimes it does the trick. So I keep that one loaded up in case I want to use it. And other than that, I think that's gonna do it. Yeah, that's kind of my setup for live. And if you ever have any questions, I do teach lessons. I can do them online. I can do them in person here if you're ever passing through New York City and you're interested in an EWI lesson. I can make myself available. Or, I could correspond with email. I can't always answer every question just because, it kind of takes, as you can tell, a lot of explanation to explain just about everything that's going on here. But yeah, if you want, drop me a line and I'll try to answer anything that you have to ask. And anyway, I also wanted to thank Lukasz at Art of the EWI for having me on, and it's been a pleasure, and hopefully this will inspire you to make some of your own sounds and make some of your own setups for live use, and maybe you'll post a video that people will learn from too. Okay, thanks.